So one draft show is not enough, especially not during quarantine, I'd say. So 4th and 9 is back. We had just done a draft-heavy podcast, and we did this for the first round, and now we're back for day 2 and day 3, which are the 49ers money rounds. This is where they found George Kittle and Fred Warner, some major contributors to the team. This is really how they've built it up and gotten to the Super Bowl last year, and this is where they have a lot of their draft picks. So we're back to talk about the types of players they might be able to find in 2020. The draft is coming up this week. I'm here with David and Akash of 4th and 9, and they're here with a couple of names that you could be hearing about this week. So what's up, guys? How are we doing today?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having us back. I'm glad we're doing this again so soon.
Yeah, what's up, Dylan? It's always good to talk 49ers football, and especially in times of quarantine, there's not much else to do. And as you know, I'm just tired of talking about the first round, so it's always fun to talk about the later round, guys.
Yeah, we've talked about the first round ad nauseum, and I think everyone was pretty exhausted by it. So, and I myself have not really heard about some of the guys that we could be hearing about the later rounds this week. So, yeah, kind of wanted to hear who you've been looking at. So, if you want to start with some of the guys that you've been looking really closely at, who fits this team?
Yeah, so let's get it started with maybe a position of need is a move tight end. So if you followed the 49ers kind of free agent moves this offseason, they had meetings or they were in talks with Atlanta's Austin Hooper, who's, not necessarily a blocking tight end, but more of a receiving tight end. And if you follow their pre-draft visits, one of the names that jumped out was Washington's Hunter Bryant. Me especially, I live in Seattle. I live super close to the UW campus, watched a lot of Hunter Bryant games. So it was a name that was familiar kind of throughout the season. And when I saw that the Niners met with him pre-draft, it kind of made sense, right? They're looking for more of a 2 tight end set, someone to pair with George Kittle, someone who can be more of a receiving threat. And by move tight end, I mean someone that just doesn't line up in line, but someone that can line up in the slot, someone that can line up outside. And Shanahan can move him around basically. So first guy I've got is Hunter Bryant, 6'2" guy, so not typical tight end size, a little smaller than what you'd expect. You'd consider more of a tweener. I think his route running is fantastic for someone of that size. Washington kind of moved him around all over, slot, outside, in the backfield, in line. So he's very versatile. He had good ball skills. Was good after the catch. I think his 40 time, which was like 4.74, was probably the biggest knock on him. They thought he would test better than that. So that's probably the biggest reason he's going to slide. But I could see him as a solid pairing with George Kittle.
I like it, and you actually had a really good piece on him on the site about why he would be a really good piece with George Kittle. So if you guys hadn't seen that, check out Akash's piece at 4th9.com. David, you also were looking at tight ends for the 49ers on day 2 and day 3. Somebody who I hadn't heard about that you told me about. Who was that guy?
Yeah, the guy who I really like, because I definitely agree with Akash on this, that tight end is absolutely a position of need. For all the reasons he outlined, and the Niners are kind of showing their hand already how important that is to them. So the guy I really like, and he started already get some pre-draft buzz, this guy named Dalton Keene. He's a tight end from Virginia Tech. He's 6'4", 250, 9 3/4 hands. His measurables at the combine were really what threw him through the roof. Kind of like we were talking, in our previous draft show. No one knew who Javarius Moore was till he got measured at the combine. He had the 3rd best cone drill tight ends at 707, best broad jump at 125, 5th best overall 40 at 4.71. It's vertical 34 inches, which put him right in the middle of the pack. But you pair that all together, that's one heck of an athletic 6'4" man. Some things that came off when I was looking through, scouting reports on him, gets rave reviews on character, work habits, plays through the whistle, plays hard. I actually thought that there were these 2 quotes from Roto-World and Lance Zierlein that I really liked because I think it's going to sound pretty familiar. From Roto-World, Keene's baseline ability in a number of roles can provide an offense with immense versatility and the freedom to disguise many of their looks, especially with respect to moving pieces in the run game. That sounds absolutely perfect what Shanahan looks for. Lance Zierlein called him a Swiss Army knife in terms of position versatility. I mean, that's exactly what, Shanahan wants. It's not just a guy that can absolutely play that role precisely. He wants to disguise, deceive, and move you around. So I really like Dalton Keene if he's there on day 3. And there's a darn good chance he may not be because the buzz around this guy's growing.
Do we know why he's not being talked about more?
I think he's just Virginia Tech, offensive system he was in. That's the only thing I can really see about him. I mean, he also did, there may be some scheme stuff. He did also, but similar to Kittle, a lot of leak routes where he would just kind of like disguise and go underneath and get open that way. So maybe it's the system that he played in that's kind of not giving him the look he deserves. But as an athlete and a guy that Shanahan has values and traits Shanahan would really love, I don't see why they wouldn't be all over this guy if he's there on day 3.
Now, before we talk about some of the other tight end prospects that I know that you guys have, what were you guys kind of envisioning for this offense? And do you think this is more of a replacement player, or is this to take Shanahan's offense to the next level with a 2 tight end set?
I think this is the next evolution in the offense. When you go back and watch Jimmy Garoppolo from this season, his average depth of throw was, I think, like 5.3 yards in the air. A lot of his throws were in the middle of the field, between the numbers, not outside the numbers. So naturally, you'd be thinking, okay, more tight ends, more guys that can catch over the middle of the field and gain yards after the catch, right? So you're not necessarily you could think, okay, the 49ers need someone over the top with speed to stretch the field, but maybe Shanahan's thinking, okay, let's play on our strengths. And the 49ers may be thinking, okay, let's add another middle of the field guy rather than something different to the offense.
So I totally agree with all those points, and I'll just add one more. We do also have a wide receiver problem. I mean, I know that's one of the things we've kind of banged ad nauseum into the floor, but it's there. I wrote an article about it. It's like you really have Debo, Bourne, and a whole lot of hope that guys are going to be there. I would rather know that I have another pass-catching tight end that I can maneuver and deceive with if I need that wide receiver core to get some time to get it in shape. So I think it solves all the problems Akash mentioned, but also just gives the wide receiver room a little bit more breathing room.
Yeah, and another red zone threat too, right? Going into last season, George Kittle, Kendrick Bourne were probably your biggest red zone guys. Kendrick Bourne of all guys, right? So adding another, 6'3", 6'4" guy just helps create space in the red zone, helps out Jimmy Garoppolo. So,
and you can't help but think of the New England Patriots. They've been calling this Patriots West for a long time. The Gronk and Kittle comparisons. You get Jimmy from New England, and the respect between Belichick and Shanahan. That offense for a short period of time in New England was really deadly, and I think that this would be something if they could find the right tight end to complement George Kittle. So, who is another player that you guys think could be fill that role? Akash.
Yeah, so when you look through these tight ends, at least they're measurables. It's fascinating to think that George Kittle ran a 4.52 at like 6'5", 250 pounds. Just of that size to run that speed and to drop to the 5th round, it's pretty outrageous. Because most of these guys you look at in the later rounds are running 4.6, 4.7 at a lower weight. So Kittle's speed's off the charts is one of the things I caught. But another name that popped up was Devin Asiasi. Pac-12 UCLA guy. Again, watched a lot of him here living on the West Coast. Another name that met with the 49ers, pretty similar size to Hunter Bryant, 6'3", 250, so a little bit bigger. I think his biggest strength were his hands. He had 9 contested catches this past season, which was top 10. Only had 1 drop, which was, again, top 5, I think. So his hands were fantastic. His biggest issue, again, is his speed, probably. His just inability to run away from smaller defenders is probably the biggest thing. But, again, if you're looking for someone to make contested catches over the middle of the field, a move tight end, line him up anywhere, Asiasi could be a good fit for the 49ers too.
And do you think he's going to care more about the speed or just the pure ability to separate, the blocking? Like, what kind of traits is he looking for at the move tight end position?
I would say route running and the ability to line up anywhere, right? You see George Kittle do that a lot, but the other tight ends that the 49ers had last season, like Levine Toilolo, great blocker, but when he comes on the field, he's not catching passes necessarily, right? And so, like David mentioned earlier, you want someone that you could disguise and you could line up these tight ends anywhere and just, deceive a defense of what's coming.
Yeah. David, you said you had another tight end?
I do, and this one really goes to address the issue and threat I think Shanahan wants to have, and that would be a red zone specific tight end. And I butchered this guy's name last time. I think I got it down this time. Albert Ukuwebanum, a tight end from Missouri. He didn't do a lot at the combine, and that may be why he's kind of flying under people's radars. But as Akash was just talking about speed, this guy is 6'5", just under 260, 10 and a quarter hands. He ran a 4.49 40, so that had to have woken a lot of people up immediately. I highly advise, just watch the film on this guy. Pull up any YouTube you want of him in the red zone. This guy has incredible ball skills. When he's catching a flat, he's got the speed to break away from the defenders. The way he contorts his body in the air and his ball fight in the red zone is really what makes him attractive to me. He must have a basketball background. He really knows how to box a guy out and then launch himself up, out, any direction to grab a ball. He's really, really impressive in the red zone. Where he needs to work on is something, that's honestly is a staple of Shanahan's offense is his run blocking. And they do say he needs to get off the line a little bit better. That's common with big guys. That those first 3 steps can be kind of tough for them. And it runs a little too upright as he gets into his route. But once he gets his steps in and he's in that red zone, the jump balls he fought for and came down with, you can't help but be impressed with it. So I definitely highly recommend taking a look at that tape if you're interested in seeing a tight end who can really get up and fight for balls in the red zone.
So of this group of tight ends, did you guys fall in love with one? Was there a favorite? Was there a best fit for the 49ers? Like, who would you be most eager to see in this offense?
So if I was picking between the 2 guys that I had named, I would probably go Hunter Bryant a little bit over Devin CSC. Just the high-end flash ability from Bryant was more evident in the games I watched. I watched Washington play Cal, Hawaii, and Oregon, which was a big game. And Bryant was just more impactful than CSC was. So I would lean that way.
I would lean just towards Dalton Keene just based on his versatility more than anything else. And I guess that's really what it comes down to is what do they want in this exact tight end. If they want a guy that's versatile, I would go with Keene. If they want more of just a burner and a red zone target, another guy, if they want just a big tight end that's just a pure red zone target, there's always Colby Parkinson from Stanford that will probably go around very late on day 3. But for me, it's Dalton Keene just due to versatility.
Awesome. So moving down the prospect list, away from tight ends, do we have any defensive players?
Yeah, so I think the talk of the town, if not for receivers, cornerback. So names being tossed around: C.J. Henderson, A.J. Terrell, Jeff Gladney, all these first-round guys, right? But look at where the 49ers added their corners. Take out Richard Sherman, who's a free agent signing. You got Kella Witherspoon in the 3rd round. Emmanuel Mosley, you got is an undrafted free agent. They added Tim Harris, the Virginia guy, on day 3 last year, who didn't play this season. So it's all these guys on day 2 and day 3, right? So I was a betting man. I would bet that the 49ers add a defensive back on day 2 or day 3 rather than the 1st round. And a name that consistently comes up is Cameron Dantzler from Mississippi State. So 6'2" guy, 190 pounds, has the length and the height that 49ers typically look for in their corners. So did Seattle kind of back in the day, right? That lengthy, tall guy that can kind of match and mirror in man coverage. And that was Dantzler's strength, I think, at Mississippi State. He had 14 passes defense in the last couple of years, 4 interceptions. He was sort of their lockdown corner. The biggest reason for his slide was his 40 time at the combine. It was 4.62, I believe. So typically, for a high-end corner, you want them to run in the 4.3 to 4.4 range, ideally. Typically, if their ability to close the gap on a receiver is better when their speed happens to be in that range. So 4.6 is pretty slow, but Dantzler did post a video from his personal pro day where he ran like a 4.38. So realistically, his number is probably somewhere in between that. It's probably not 4.38. It's probably not 4.62. Probably somewhere in between, which I think is good enough. So he's a 5th-round guy that I think you can land. I think his weight's probably the biggest concern at 190. Probably want a little bit more muscle on that. And I think he's a 5th, 6th-round guy that the 49ers can definitely add.
Before I get into my defensive player, I want to reiterate that one. I love Dantzler. I think he would be a great late pick. Really, really, I think he's absolutely worth a 6th or 7th round pick for sure. The guy I went with, I do have 2 defensive players, but the guy I'll go with first is I do think no matter what, edge is a need right now. There seems to be a real disagreement on how much of defensive line and defensive end is a need for this team, but we've lost some players, both on the interior and outside, and I think we need to replace it both in this draft, both inside and at edge. We clearly had a health problem with Ford. We're going to need to continue to monitor and manage his snaps. We also have Blair coming back off an ACL. So I would really like a plug-and-play, go-get-him edge from the beginning that can just be both insurance and get a lot of work early on the season while Blair's getting fully healthy. So the guy I really like for that is a guy named Alton Robinson. He's an edge from Syracuse. You watch a film on this guy, he's just got great burst, great get-off. He just gets right around tackles. He's always going wide, which is a knock on him I'm going to get to. But he's really got a great bend, great closing speed, great pursuit traits. I think he's a guy that you could put out there, and you're going to have to account for him for day one. Defenses will catch notice of this guy real quick. Now, that being said, he's an one-trick pony. I forget the guy last year that was like that we all really liked. There was an edge like that. That was a knock on him. That he just had the outside speed and bend. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name right now. But anyways, I really like him for just a pure plug-and-play, go-get-him edge, situational, developmental guy.
Yeah, I think most fans are forgetting, I see a lot of, the 49ers have a lot of defensive line depth, but you're forgetting they arguably lost their best defensive lineman to DeForest Buckner. Sheldon Day followed suit. He's in Indianapolis. Ronald Blair's coming off of an ACL injury. DJ Jones is coming off of an injury. Contavious Street, same deal. So a lot of these guys coming off of IR, there's a lot of question marks. Obviously, like you mentioned, D Ford is a big question mark with, his health. So I think adding defensive line help, like you mentioned, is a good thing.
Yeah. People are just so used to saying the 49ers have D-line depth that they just keep saying it. So, they actually do need some help there. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did tap into it. I'll throw a guy out there. I have not studied the prospects like you guys have this year, but I watch college ball and every now and then. And one guy I've liked the last few years, and I wanted him when he first kind of broke out onto the scene, was a player at Michigan. That was Kaliki Hudson. He was a linebacker, defensive back. He played the Viper position after Jabril Peppers left. He had a big first year when he first got to Michigan, and he was just a pure athlete. And I think that's what you're looking for on day 2, day 3. You're not getting polished technique as much. You're kind of just hoping for an athlete. And the great thing about the 49ers defense is, they have the coaching staff to get the most out of an athlete, hopefully develop them, but they also have great players to enable someone like a Kaliki Hudson who can just kind of roam and make plays. And when he was at his best at Michigan, that's what he was doing. He kind of plays all over. He could play in the box. I think you'd want him playing in the box in kind of some kind of hybrid role, but they would have to create something for him. This would be like more of a fun pick, like, if you were going to try to experiment with something like that. And, the Niners are almost there where if they wanted to have some kind of weapon on defense, I think that's what you can try to do with Kaliki Hudson. But, I look at Dre Greenlaw, I look at Fred Warner, and I look at Kaliki Hudson, and I'm like, this is not out of the question at all. those are safety linebackers, and that's what Kaliki Hudson is. He's a safety linebacker. He fits right in. And I think even though he's not on that same level, like Warner was talked about as like a higher pick, but, Hudson could come in, and I think he could definitely play in, third down role, sub package, come in, blitz, that kind of thing, maybe hold his guy in the slot. But he is definitely worth a look on, if you can get him in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, depending how badly you want him. He might go undrafted, but if you do want him, and you don't want him to have the option of which team he's choosing, I think you should draft him. And that means, day 3 if you can get him. So I'd like to see him land with some good coaching staff and some good players where he can play to his best.
Yeah, I think in today's NFL, having cover linebackers who are quicker, who can keep up with both tight ends and running backs is something you look for rather than, the harder hitting run stuffing linebacker, right? So adding a guy like Hudson, I think could – having more athletes on defense is a good thing.
Yeah, I truthfully did not look into linebackers this year, but I think we saw after Quan got hurt and Greenlaw stepped into it. Shayer did a great job, but it's definitely a position we need another athletic cover guy to come in a pinch. So I do see that as a day 3 need. I had other positions I was more passionate about. I just did not get into linebackers, but I think a linebacker is in play on day 3.
Just like running back, it always has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all the defenders I had in my 5 selections. I think David had one more defensive guy.
Yeah, I have one more defensive guy. Then I'll wrap up with the guy I'm actually the most passionate about, which is on the offensive side of the ball. But my last defensive guy is a guy named Bravion Roy he's a defensive lineman from Baylor. I'm just going to – Steelers Depot have a really good write-up on him. I'm just going to go with the quote. He's he's just a big block-eating guy, but his comp is a Sheldon Day type in a 4-3 front. That's exactly what we need right now. We need that guy that can get in there, eat up blockers, and let these great pursuit linebackers go eat. I think that's a guy that could come in and do that pretty quickly. I mean, great thing about the Niners defensive line is, you've got so much talent around you. You've got great coaching. It doesn't take much for a guy to find that 4th gear that he hasn't done yet in college when, you put the right coaching, right system, and teach him a few new moves. He's very athletic, great, quick get off. He does have some interior pass rush skills, which we do need. We also do he's a good, reliable run stuffer, which, run defense, we had our moments where we just couldn't seem to stop guys up the middle. That we definitely had a few games where it seemed like we couldn't stop the run, and we really are on a big space-eating defensive lineman, and he would be my guy. The knocks on him are some of the things you hear typical, like a day 3 prospect that just doesn't play with enough power, shorter arms. The one knock on him, was not being a bull rusher too up the middle, but I would really like him. Another guy to be similar to him would be McTelvin Agam from a defensive line from Arkansas. But I think we really do need someone in that Sheldon Day mold to start grooming to be in that position.
Yeah, totally agree. I tweeted this out earlier today, and, it kind of gets lost on Twitter again with the defensive line depth, and they throw out how many first-round picks the 49ers have spent on defensive linemen in the past years. But you look at it, and the 49ers gave up 4.4 yards per attempt on the ground last season, which was 21st in the league. A lot of the times, the way to attack the Niners defense last season was to rush the ball. It mitigated Nick Bosa and Dee Ford. And, I think that was a way to attack them, and they lost 2 guys in the middle. So finding someone like Agam there late on day 3 to be a space-eating defensive tackle, like Peter King likes to say, is a good fit, I think.
I think also one thing that we, really look at too is also the contracts that are coming up. Yeah. I think there's a real reason to get – I know we've drafted so many defensive line and edges over the last few years, but kind of like Dylan alluded to, something you're going to do every year. It is a deep position group. You're always going to have guys coming off injuries. You're always going to be losing guys to contracts. It's pretty much, you can bet that you're going to be adding defensive line, whether edge and interior, every darn draft, especially in this current era of Niners football.
Yeah. This wasn't one of my 5 guys, but Raekwon Davis from Alabama was a name that I saw was super popular. I haven't watched him at all, but again, day 3 defensive lineman is a need, I think, for this team. So moving on, I've got 2 running backs for coming back to offense. So the first running back I've got is Darrington Evans. I mentioned this name last week on the last podcast, but I watched a little bit more of him. He was someone that the 49ers met with at the Combine, and he ran a 4.4, which was, I think, top 2. So, again, his speed kills. You look at the 49ers, Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert. Like I mentioned, when they hit that hole, their ability to separate from the second-level defenders is outstanding, and I think that's what Kyle Shanahan looks for. I'm convinced speed is his first trait as a running back. He's not so much enamored with the other stats, so that's where he starts. So I think Darrington Evans is a guy to watch. A little undersized, 5'11", a little smaller than what you'd expect from a running back, but and he's become more popular since the Combine, so he might not be there in the 5th round, but he's a name to watch on day 3, especially with the rumors of Matt Breida not being back with the 49ers next season. Jerick McKinnon's on a 1-year contract. You just don't know what his health situation is, and it's always good to have depth at that spot.
I'll go with my final prospect. He's on the offensive side of the ball, and actually, this is a guy I would really, really like to see in a Niners uniform next year. I definitely want to watch this guy tape. I mean, I honestly bluntly fell in love with watching this guy play. His name is Nisani Muti. He's a tackle guard from Fresno State. I'm going to start off with why I love this guy. He played total 697 pass protection snaps, only allowed 14 QB pressures. I said in our last podcast, it seemed like Shanahan really built the Niners offensive line to be road graders rather than pass protectors. And I think we need to kind of go back a little bit to guys that kind of either do it both or a little bit more on the pass pro side. So I really like that he's a pass pro guy first. In 17, when he played all 14 games, Fresno State was the 3rd best offensive line in the country for sacks allowed. They went 6 games without giving up a sack. They only gave up 2 sacks in 2 total games, and it was against Alabama and Boise State. Now you're probably asking, why am I citing 17 numbers? Unfortunately, this kid has had a bad injury bug. He back in 2018, he played 1.5 games, and he tore his Achilles. He was right back there for the beginning of the 2019 season, played 3 games, and he hurt his shoulder. Now, in 18, they had him at tackle. In 19, they moved him back into guard. So I do like that versatility that he would bring to the table. But obviously, he's got an injury thing. Now, the one good thing about these injuries, they're totally different and non-correlated injuries of an Achilles and the shoulder, and the Achilles came first. So I think he's worth a gamble health-wise. And I'll tell you one thing that really stuck out to me about his play, too, is how he absolutely just ragdolls defensive linemen. I mean, just truly takes guys off their feet and demoralizes them. Plays real nasty. You can see he wants to win every matchup he's in. He's not just doing his job to get a guy open. He's trying to dominate the other man. Really aggressive, real domination streak in him. One thing I couldn't help but notice, he doesn't just finish the play, he finishes it again. He will bury a guy, get up and look for another guy to bury, and he is testing the whistle being blown a lot. I love this guy. I just love how he plays. One thing that jumped off to me kind of buried in the notes was this guy was a team captain in 2019. And as I just said, this guy only played 1.5 games the season before. He was named a team captain. As a guy that played college sports, you don't usually name a guy team captain who didn't play the year before. That's really got to speak to how the locker room feels passionately about this guy, and I think that's a trait you can never outlook. He's obviously a hard worker, and his teammates respect him as either a man, as a player, and probably both. So this is a guy, when you watch him on tape, man, it's like that scene in the Avengers of the Hulk picking up Loki and just tossing him all over the place. If not for injuries, there's no doubt in my mind this guy's a day 1 prospect, and I'd love to see us take a chance on him on day 3.
That would be a first, right? I think Lynch and Shanahan haven't drafted a guard yet, so.
Not once, not ever. It shocked me.
It needs to happen. Especially they've gutted that position out. They have Tom Compton there. They cut Mike Person. Oof. I mean, they got very lucky. Laken Tomlinson has been a miracle at left guard.
100%. Yeah. I think a lot of people crushed that signing.
Yeah, it was hard not to. There was no evidence that was going to work out. And, smart people that cover the Detroit Lions would have told you that was not going to work. So, yeah, they got lucky doing that. But, yeah, they need to invest in the interior offensive line. So, yeah, that would be a good pick. Good research there. Any other prospects?
Yeah, so last one, another running back. I'm a fan of adding running backs every year. And I think it's tough to find guys, as undrafted free agents. I think fans are kind of, they're used to seeing undrafted names run for the 49ers, but it's hard to consistently hit on those guys year in and year out, right? So a day 3 prospect I would consider is Reggie Corbin, the Illinois running back. So he actually didn't even participate at the combine. He was a snub. But at his local pro day, which was one of the last ones before Corona hit, he ran a 6.853 cone, which is, I think, one of Shanahan's favorite combine measurables. That 3-cone time would have been the best out of all the running backs that ran at the pro day. So he would have finished first in that drill. His biggest knock is his size. He's 5'10", 200, and that's, a really small frame, what you'd expect from a running back. He's not much of a receiving threat. I think he only caught 3 passes this past season. And I know Shanahan really likes having someone that kind of has a dual threat, so you can kind of, again, move them around, deceive the defense. But that wouldn't be Reggie Corbin. He'd be more of a first or second down sort of running threat. But when you throw on his tape, his ability to change directions and make quick cuts are just off the charts. It's like, you've got a video game controller, and I don't even know what the stick is, a Y stick, Z stick, whatever it is. He's just juking out defenders left and right. His ability to just make those cuts and then hit the hole is phenomenal. And I think that's the biggest thing that'll attract the 49ers to Corbin. I think my comp for him, if you watch the Eagles at all this season, when their rookie running back went down, Boston Scott came in. Boston Scott reminds me a lot of Reggie Corbin reminds me of Boston Scott, actually. So I think he could be another add at this running back position. That brings something a little different than what these guys already have.
Yeah, that would be a great fill-in. I liked Boston Scott a lot in Philadelphia. And you got to like that in not just Shanahan's offense, but what he's kind of accrued with these downfield blockers at wide receiver, Debo, Kittle, some of the blocking wide receivers at the top of the draft as well. So, yeah, that would really open up the offense. So, yeah, I think we got a lot of names to look out for later this week. Write these ones down. I mean, we have a lot here. I think a lot of these guys actually do fit San Francisco. There was some good research done here. If you guys have any questions, follow-ups, we're on Twitter. You can read more of our articles on fourthandnine.com. I encourage you to follow both of these guys on Twitter. And, you can get more of our content there. Until next time, thanks for watching.